here's all you'll need, at least I think. Strangely enough, the red and the green was one type of acrylic that came out of a tube, and the orange was another kind, a little bit thinner, that came out of a bottle, and the orange seemed to diffuse immediately, whereas the red and the green stayed together and let me warm them around. So different types of paint, maybe even different colors, but that's where experimenting comes from. And it's kind of cool because the orange is like kind of dyeing it in a diffused way, but I still wanted to leave some clear spaces where you can see through here. So we're gonna let this sit. It's supposed to cure in about an hour, but we'll give it a little more time than that. Let's see how these came out. Okay, not bad. Some of the wax paper residue stuck to the bottom, and I don't know if that's because I use cheap dollar store wax paper or because that's just inevitable. But in any case, it doesn't matter too much because, oops, you can just use some sandpaper and just rub that off pretty easily. This is a sanding block, but any kind of pretty low-grade sandpaper will do. And don't worry about the sandpaper roughing it up too much, because the next step we're going to do is going to smooth over all issues on this side. Also, just rubbing it with your fingernail, you can get most of the white residue off, sometimes even better than sandpaper, depending. You guys might find even better methods. You can let me know in the comments. But also make sure that you rinse it in water every now and then, because a lot of the white powder made by the actual sanding process will start to stick to the surface and make you think that you have a lot more sanding to do than you actually do. So sometimes just rinsing it will get most of that white stuff away, because a lot of it's loose powder. I'm finding aggressively just rubbing it with the edge of this popsicle stick, just pushing pretty hard, is doing a better job than the sandpaper even. Getting rid of, and it's not going to be crystal clear until we do the next step, so don't worry about that. But you just want to get rid of the white fuzzies. There, you can see quite a bit of difference between this one and this one. You're not going to get it totally clear just yet, and some of it is just little bubbles too. It's hard to get rid of the bubbles when you're first using epoxy resin. Hitting it with a heat gun while it's drying can sometimes get rid of bubbles, but we're just doing like, this is the rough version just to have fun and show you that even just the rough version, you can make some really pretty pieces. Okay, you can see quite a bit of difference after rinsing them thoroughly, rubbing them, sanding them, rinsing them, and drying them. However, these are the backs. The backs are not nearly as shiny and whimsical and pretty as the fronts. And so what we're going to do is take a tiny bit more, just like half as much as we use to make just one set, more resin. And we're going to paint the back side of these and then let them dry for another few hours. And that should make the other side crystal clear, unlike how it's matte, matte right now. And we'll see how that comes out. We're going to sacrifice a little baby paintbrush for this because it's probably not going to recover afterwards. That's okay. So just painting it over the surface. And we got to go quick because this stuff hardens in 5 minutes, and it starts to harden right away in like the first really minute. So you want to just paint the whole surface. Don't worry about getting it smooth. It'll smoothen out on its own. And I probably should have put wax paper down for this part too, but I started pouring the ingredients and then I had to hurry. So just get it right to the edge and just get the whole thing covered. And you should be good because it'll kind of gloop on its own. It'll kind of take the shape of, it'll kind of smooth out as it dries. And if I have to pour a tiny bit more, if this stuff gets too gloopy before I finish, that's okay too. I bought one extra tube just to be on the safe side. Though if you're going to do this in bulk, you want to buy a larger amount of resin, the 2-part epoxy, because this small stuff is cheap and easy to get started, but in the long run, you're actually paying more per ounce when you buy these little tiny tubes from the hardware store. Go to Amazon and you can find, it's still not super cheap, but for like 40 or 50 bucks, you can get much larger amounts that can help you to make hundreds of pairs of these earrings, as opposed to the $5.95 I paid for this double tube. Only got me these 4 pair here, these 8 little puddles. And I've been told that hitting it with a heat gun carefully can get out a lot of the bubbles. Now, I think some bubbles make it look kind of whimsical and magical and cool, but too many bubbles can take away from the clear effect and make it look kind of foggy. So let's see what we can do. Oh, I forgot to paint that one. Oh, that's good. I gotta finish that first. And be careful, you could really burn yourself with this thing. I have it on very low and I'm keeping my hand very far away just to test it. A hair dryer will work too. That's a little safer. I put it on a little higher now, and you can actually see the little bubbles popping when you get real close, like little twinkles. So this is, if you have a hair dryer around, this is actually a good idea. All right. And I waited one extra day, and I'm really glad I did. Don't listen to what they say about giving it an hour. You really need a whole day in between adding each layer. But I really like how these came out on both sides. You can't really hardly tell which side the paint was originally put on. It just kind of blends, which is what you want. Anyway, you can leave them as blobs, but I like to make them more into uniform shapes. So believe it or not, they cut really easily with scissors. Even cheap dollar store scissors. So I'm going to cut this one into kind of a fat leaf shape. Leaves and ovals generally are the easiest shape that just tends to work for earrings. Now this edge is going to be matte, unlike the rest of it that's going to be see-through. If that bothers you, you can always paint on another little layer of epoxy, but then you have one more day of drying time, so that's totally up to you. And you can cut paper stencils to get the shape you want, or you can just cut one freeform and then cut the other one based off of the first one to get them the same shape and size. Or if you want, you could just leave them as free-form puddles the way they are and understand that earrings don't have to match exactly as long as they're roughly the same weight and the same style. And sometimes that makes them funkier and cooler and more handmade. Whatever you choose to do. And now that I'm finding that I really like how the paint looks behind the glass more than on top, even though I did try to swirl it in with a toothpick, it mostly got on top. I would take the time to put another layer of resin over the top of this side too, and even after, now that they're cut, I would even put more. So, you know, several layers isn't going to hurt you. If you do a big batch with a whole bunch, then you can afford to take 3 or 4 days to put enough layers and coats that you feel really good about it. So anyway, have fun with this, guys. Now, to poke a hole so that you can make them into earrings, if you have a drill handy, they drill really easily. If you don't have a drill, you could literally get any piece of metal that's kind of long and sharp, pretty much like a fork tine or anything like a skewer, anything like that. Heat it up on the stove for a couple seconds until it starts to glow. Be careful, and then you can poke it right through and it'll just melt right through. But I'm going to use a drill here. That's it. It's so fast. Just make sure you position the hole so it's high enough that you can fit a medium-sized jump ring, but not so high that it's gonna break through, you know, and pop out the top and ruin it. You want to use, with most earring hooks, 2 jump rings, because one jump ring and an earring hook will turn it this way when it's put into the ear, and you want it to face out from the ear, whichever side you think is prettier. These are 8mm jump rings, and these are 4mm jump rings, in case you are not familiar and you're wondering what sizes are best. They just work for me. Medium size 6mm could work as an in-between one too, and you can also use 10mm.